So I'm just going to show you something else really quickly. Since I've essentially shown you the majority of things that you would need to know to continue filling this out, um, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to click on the artboard so that I can pull it out, because I know that there would be more content on this page that would end up scrolling up. So I'm going to pull that down, and here's what I'm going to do for right now. You know, this is, as I said before, the size that the background would actually need to fill a screen this dimension. But just so that you can see what other things are going to look like with that background image beside it, I could do one of two things. I could either take it and duplicate it so that it becomes like a repeating image, which I kind of hate, right? It wouldn't really look like that, but you know, at least it's not big. Or I'm going to undo that. Or the other thing that I could do, knowing that it's not really the way it's supposed to look, is I could literally take this background picture, and I'm going to hold down Shift, and I'm going to actually make it really, really big. And knowing that that's not really the way that the page would fill up, okay? It would actually be this other size. So just be aware of that, okay? Unless you wanted to set it so that the background scrolled with the page. So anyway, now the other thing I want to show you really quickly is I'm going to take this box and I'm going to duplicate this box by holding Shift Option, and I'm going to create it so that the margin looks something like that, so it's fairly even with these others. And I'm going to use this as a foundation for my next section. And I just want to show you really quickly how you can kind of create some other modular areas. And everything else that I showed you, pretty much, I think you can basically figure out from what I've shown you so far. So you don't have to watch me type stuff. I'm just going to paste in some content that I had already created. All of this is really simple to know how to do. Like, you already know how to make titles. This is more text. And this section right here, these are just two lines right here, these little blue lines that you see. They're supposed to be like horizontal rules, and I just use the line tool. This is the line tool right here to draw it. Now, the thing is, let's say that below here you're also going to have some other, maybe some articles, like, you know, recent posts or featured articles that are not these call to actions up here, or promotional items up here, but it's something else, like just like your blog post stuff that you want to show up on that page. So what I can do is I'm going to select this larger box, and I want it to all be part of that box. So I'm just going to drag this down, and I'm going to start to create some of that content. So let's say that I want to make a special design where I have each article show like a box, and it's got like part of the article showing with a little read more button, and then it fades down. So let's go ahead and create a box like that, and I'm going to line it up with this. And let's say that we want it to be somewhere in the ballpark of halves, something like that. And we can test to see if that's about the right size by duplicating and seeing if the margins line up. And I don't know, I'm not sure about that. Maybe they need to be a little bit different size. Or the other thing that we can do is we can have them so that they are closer together. So let's say that we want the margin to be more like that, and then we can take both of these boxes and we could center them so that they're just a little bit inset, you know, however you want to do that. We could also have a containing box that they go inside of too, because these articles, these, you know, little blog posts, they're going to be inside of a container. So, you know, maybe we want to take both of these and kind of scale them down or something. Let's see how big. Let's just make each one of them about 700. So if we let's do like maybe 700 each by like maybe 350 or something each. And then we can put those in the center and then kind of see how that might look. And then we can put another box behind it. And what I'll do is I'm going to just cut this set of boxes. I'm going to cut those real quickly, and then I'm going to make a new box. And the reason I'm going to paste them on top is because then I don't have to bother to send them backwards in the arrangement. So let's make a box that kind of lines up with these margins, and I'll just make it this big for right now. And I can also give this some transparency if we still want to be able to see through it a little bit. Take that border off. Here, let's go here and let's make this like 95% or 90%. The only thing is that you can't You can kind of still see through it, but not really. So maybe let's do it like at 60%, or even let's try like 75% possibly. Let's try that. And I do want to actually give it a border, but I don't want it to be that color. So if I go here to border, for the border, I can go over here and choose that color. Oops. Here, let's just take this. I'm going to copy that hex number into my clipboard, undo that. Let's go back over here to the border, and I'm going to paste that hex number there because it's wanting to grab that as a fill. Okay, so now what I can do is I can go ahead and I can paste. Oh, shoot, now I can't paste those because I copied the hex number, and so, but I remember what I did. I made a box. My bad. I made a box that was somewhere in the ballpark of like 700. It was like 700. Let's see what that looks like by 350. And I want to change that border back to that blue color so that we have matching blue color borders. And I can take this box now and kind of make it so that the margins are even, and then see what happens if I duplicate it. And so that the margins are somewhat even, and that might be okay. Let's see how that looks. I'll click off of that, and that's not too bad. I'm going to just double check, and I'm going to make sure that this is perfectly centered and see if I still like it. And I think that'll be a pretty good way of doing it right now. That's just to get an idea of centering. So the thing I want to show you how to do, I'm just going to do it on one, and then we'll use a repeating region after I get this thing set up the way I want it, is I need I want like a blue box here that's got white text that's got the name of the article, and then inside of that it'll be a blurb of text with a little icon that says next. And then you can figure out how you want it based on that. So I'm going to go ahead and just take my drawing tool up here, and I'm going to start to draw a box that would be a good size box, you know, for a title, and then I can give it a color, right, like that. And I'm going to take the border of it off. I don't want it to have a border, and I can sort of center it and then figure out what I want the rest of this margin to be. Like, I don't, maybe something like that. Let's just see what that's going to look like. Right, so now I want to put some text inside of that. I'll grab my text tool, and I'm going to put the words article title, and I want these to be in all caps. So I'll say article title, and I like the idea of this not being centered. I like it being left justified. So I'm going to select this and tell it to be Oswald. All right, and then let's try something like around 35 for the scale. And I want to make that text white. So let's go over here for the fill, and let's make it solid white. And I need to, you know, make sure that it's in the right spot. So let's kind of see how it looks like, maybe that. All right, so this means that the article title would be like a block level element that would have a background fill and some padding, right? And then we could have the text of the article come in here. So if I take this text box, what I can do is I can click, and I can actually drag to create the scale of the text box, so that, you know, it is a specific size. And then I could put some lorem ipsum in there. So I'm just going to type that for a second, and I'm going to go and copy some from the web. All right, so I copied some from the web, and here's the thing about lorem ipsum and XD is that a bunch of other Adobe products already have it where if you draw out a text box, it automatically fills it with lorem ipsum, or there's some other really convenient feature to just add it. XD doesn't have it as of the time that I'm doing this video, but I suspect that they'll add that in the future. Anyway, so I'm just going to paste that there, and I'm going to do a select all, and I'm going to change this so that I have railway. Let's see, railway. And let's do this at, let's try like 23. And I think I like the scale of that in comparison to this other text. I don't think that it should be quite as big. Maybe 24. Let's try that. Somewhere in that ballpark. And I think that I like the color of this. So let's take that. And if we look at that fill color, I think that I like that. So I can choose that as a color for characters. If I wanted, I can also use this as a color. I can use it as a character style, right? So that's one of the things I could have done. Here is another character style. but I'm going to change the color just so you can see. And I could either paste that in there, or I could just click on that color right there. And now I'm going to add that as the 24-point character style. Okay, and so now you see that it's over full, that I can drag this out just like any other kind of text fill area. Now, one of the things that you might notice is that this box is, I don't know, maybe I want this a little bit bigger. You know, I mean, ideally, I wouldn't want that much text showing probably, so I don't know how much bigger I really want the box. But I'm not holding down shift because I don't want to get too much bigger. So maybe somewhere in this ballpark, like let's try maybe like 410, just so we have a nice rounded even number. And then that would give me enough room to have a text box that I don't want to fill it up all the way. Maybe I can have the text box sort of stop here, and then I can have a button that says like read more or something. You know, like maybe something like that. I don't know. It's really kind of up to you. Or the other thing is that I can pull this up, and let me show you a little trick that you could do if you wanted this to be able to, you know, be able to have a read more button so that this text, you know, just sort of fades out and it's not a big deal. You could either do the dot dot dot, like you could put the ellipses, you know, so that this limits the number of characters, and that would be fine. Something else that you could plan on doing, and that this might be kind of nice, is if I take this background box, let's say that I take the background box right here, and I go over here to where it says fill. I'm going to click on fill, and up here where it says solid color, I'm going to try doing a gradient. And I'm going to do the gradient so that it starts over here with pure white. So I'm going to drag this gray up here. And then on this one, I'm clicking on this one, that's the top one, I'm going to have the transparency level go to 0. And so, but that's the problem now, is that that box is, it's on top, or it's behind everything, so you're not noticing the cutoff of the text. So what I could do is I could I could copy this, and I can put a you know, a copy of it on top. So I'm going to copy that, and then I'm going to do a paste, and then you see that it starts to grab this and drag it. Now the other thing is that if you don't like how much it fades, maybe I want the fade to stop here. So while I've got that selected, I can go back to my fill, and I can drag, while I have this gradient selected, I can drag the gradient so that it basically like does something like this. Like I can have it so that it starts to fade out right there, and then I can take this gradient and I can drag it up so that you can see that it really starts to disappear sooner. Okay, so we can just grab that and move that up a little bit for the slider. So I think that looks pretty good, right? Maybe around there or so. And that gives us enough room down here so that we can have like a read more button and icon. So let's go ahead and take the text tool, and I'm gonna just type out read more. I'm gonna keep it in all caps. And I'm gonna select this, and let's adjust it so that we're using the Oswald style, and I think 18 might be too small, so let's go ahead and change it to like 20 or so, maybe. Let's try that. I think that might be good. And then I want to adjust the color because that's going to be a link, and I probably am not going to want the link to be black by default. So let's try blue, maybe darker. Let's go with the lighter blue. And then what I want to probably do now is kind of scoot that over a little bit so that it's a little bit more right aligned. And I'll put the icon next to it, but let's get this right, and then let's bump it for the margin like there, and then that'll give us a little bit more room so that, you know, those margins are okay, and then the off to the right, it'll align on the right. So I'm going to go over here, and I'm going to grab this ellipse icon, the circle icon, and I'm going to click, and I'm going to drag it holding shift and option. Remember, the shift key is going to constrain it so that it becomes a perfect circle, and option will draw it out from the center. So anyway, if I click and drag that, I can go ahead and I can leave it with a white fill if I want, but I want the border to be the same color. Oops, not that. Sorry, that's a fill. I want the border to be, let's just go ahead and do it as a black for now, and see how that looks. and then you can take a look, and I want these to be the same color. So if I come over here and I click this, I can look at the fill color, copy that, and I'm going to select this object and tell the border to be the same color. All right, so I'm going to blow this up too. Now the other thing is I want the stroke to be much heavier because I want this to be a very graphic looking icon. Now, or actually what I just realized is that I don't really want this to be that much bigger than the read more, because it's showing it with the margins that it's the same size, but let's do it somewhere in the ballpark of like 21 by 21, something like that. And then we can align it, or 20 by 20, or I don't know, something. I think that that might be a little bit better. And then I'm going to increase the border. Let's try 2. I think that that might be pretty good. And now the reason that I did 21 by 21, I'm making this an odd number, and the reason is so that I can have something that's like dead center for the point of the arrow. Otherwise I might have a hard time aligning it properly. So one of the ways that you can get something that is a kind of a good symmetrical point to an arrow is you can take a rectangle and you can modify it, or you could also use the pen tool to draw that point as well. So I'm going to show you though how to do it with the rectangle tool, and the reason is that if I do it with the pen tool, it's really hard to get a perfect triangle. I think that it's a little bit hard. So I'm going to do the rectangle tool and combine it with using some Pathfinder types of tools. So I'm going to click, and down here I'm just going to create a new box, holding down the Shift key so it's a perfect square. And so what I'll do here is I'm going to change it so that it has no border, but that the fill is, I don't know, let's just make it like that color, same color that we've been using. Or you could, make it a darker version or whatever. Let's just keep it with the lighter version for now. And then the thing that's really kind of important is that we need to be able to cut this in half diagonally. So I'm going to take this, I'm just going to duplicate it. All right, by holding Shift and Option to move it off to the side. And then I'm going to take this and just make it long, because I need to basically slice this thing in half. And what I'll do is I'm going to kind of, let's blow this up and I'll show you kind of a little bit more up close. And if I see how if I hover over this corner and I click and I hold Shift, it will constrain it so that it goes to a 45-degree axis, or I could just come up here and type to make it go 45 degrees. And now what I can do is I can take this one and I can put it on top. If you want to make this one a different color just so you can see it better, you can. I'm going to put it on top so that it goes from corner to corner of this. And now if I select both of these, I'm going to click and drag. Oops. Let's try this again. I'm going to select both of those by holding Shift down. Let's do that. And so if I select both of those, the thing that's on top, if I click on this one, it'll subtract the thing that's on top. So if I click that, see, then I'm left with this triangle that's kind of perfect. And then I can hold down Shift and I can rotate it so that this becomes a 90-degree axis. And then that can be, like where my point is. Actually, let's blow this up. And I want this to fit inside of this circle. So I'm going to take this corner, holding down Shift, I'm going to scale it so that, it'll fit inside of here. And then I can see, how big I need the thing to be. Now I'm going to hold Shift down when I click and hold this, but I'm also going to hold Option so it scales from the center. And I think that that might be a kind of an okay size, right? And then I can just draw a stem over here using the line tool, or I could use the rectangle tool, whichever one works best. So, but if I use the line tool, I can kind of come right from the center and I can draw out holding down Shift like that. And then I can tell it that I want it to be a larger stroke. Like, let's say that I want it to be a stroke of 3. That's too big. If we do a stroke for 2, see, now we have sort of an issue. It's a little squirrely, where a stroke that has something that's around 2 is a little bit too big. So I'm going to take this, what do you call this, triangle here. Let's blow this up a little bit more. You can see that this doesn't quite line up properly. If I go, let's drag this even closer, and you can see that that's not the center. So if I take this and I start to drag it, this bottom corner holding the Shift key down, I can start to approximate it more toward the center of that line. And then that's pretty darn close, right? And the thing is that here's the thing that's important to remember is that I'm going to be likely using an icon font to create something that looks like this, or I could just, I could draw it in Illustrator or export this or something. It's fine. I can copy this and paste it into something else. But anyway, I just wanted to make the point then that you can use this as a drawing tool to some degree as well. Now, if I want to grab this so that it's a color that matches this outer stroke, I can just select the line because it's a line, and I can grab this borders eyedropper and I can choose this, and it goes ahead and it combines it. And the thing that I might look at if I zoom this out, I can zoom that and see if I'm comfortable with this scale, and I might think that I kind of think that maybe this part is just a little bit too big right here. So if I take one of these corners and I hold down Option, it'll scale from the center so it doesn't misalign, and I can hold down Shift so that it keeps its proportion constrained. And I can start to make that just a little bit smaller, and I might be happy with something that looks more like that. And then I can zoom out and see if that looks good to me. And I think I kind of like that a little bit better. And what I can do now is I can take these two objects, I can select both of them, and I can click on this Pathfinder where I add them together. Oops, that is not going to work actually. And the reason it won't work, and I didn't think about this, but the reason it won't work is because this line is actually a line and it's not a closed path. It's not a shape. Like if I wanted this to be combined with this other thing, I can just group it at this point. Or if I really did want to make this a special path, I could use the rectangle tool to draw the equivalent of this line. Okay, but for right now, I'll group these two objects so they don't get separated. So now when I select it, it selects the whole unit. And now I'm also going to select this other one and I'll group those so that this is now like a single icon. And let's zoom out and take a look at this and make sure that we're comfortable with the way that this looks. And I can take this now and I can move it so that it lines up there, and then I can take this read more and I can move it so that it's a little bit closer and see if I'm comfortable with that. And I think that I am. And the other thing too is that I can take these two things and I can group those together so that they now move as a single unit. Right, so I could also do something where I line it up. Instead of lining it up with this edge, I can line it up a little bit inset if if I wanted to. So it really kind of just is up to you. If you think that it should stay a little bit inset, then you can do it that way too. Okay, now here's the thing. For me to create this as a repeatable grid, oh, first of all, I want to make sure that that these two things are like lined up in a way that makes sense. Actually, I don't have to deal with that now. I can go ahead and I can delete this if I want to, because I'm going to make this a repeatable grid and then I can move the whole thing over. Anyway, but what I was going to say is, thing is I can't just select this and say repeat grid, because look what's going to happen is it's just repeating that overlay that's on top. So that's going to be a problem for me. Let me undo both of those things. I need to be able to select everything that's underneath it, and I need to group all of those things together in order for that to work. So that kind of presents a problem for me with the way that I've designed this. So one of the things that you could do to kind of accommodate that is to be able to select all of this stuff is, first of all, I can take this and I can drag it down, right? I can drag that top layer down so that I can then select some of these other things. The problem is that now you see what happened is that as I drag it down, it starts to get rid of that gradient because it's collapsing my gradient. So I'm going to drag it down to say about here, and then instead what I'll do is I'll go back to this fill where I have my gradient, and I'm going to adjust the gradient in such a way that now I can drag my handle, and I can drag my handle up, and let's do this. Let's drag this up just a tiny bit so that it starts to cover up, make space for that read more. Let's see if I can do, yeah, that's probably pretty good. And then I can drag that up just a little bit more so that that gradient starts to come up like that. And so now what I can do is I can take this read more object, and by the way, if I wanted to make that a symbol and use it somewhere else in a different layout, I could add it as a symbol here. The other thing is if I just wanted to use this as a symbol, And you know what, I'm looking at this and I kind of think maybe this should be bigger. So I'm gonna, if I double click to get inside of something that's grouped, I can actually change it uh, independently. I'm going to take that whole thing that's grouped and hold down Shift and Option, and I'm going to scale it just a little bit. And I might like that size a little bit better. Let's click off of that. Yeah, I don't know. I'm on the fence about it. Actually, I think I'm just going to leave it the way it was. Anyway, so I can take this read more symbol, and I can take this gradient. I'm holding down Shift and click that. And then if I click here while I'm holding down Shift, I click the text, and then I click over here, I hold down Shift and I click the article title, and then I click this blue box and I click this box that has the entire thing. I can group that whole thing together, object group. And so now what I have is, let's see how that works. I can click this and it should select everything for me. And if I make this a repeating grid, let's check it out and make sure that it repeats everything right. And it looks like I am able to repeat it just fine. So I'm going to zoom in here and let's do that so that I'm closing it right up against the element. Now the only thing is that it looks like I've got some weird like line in between, and I'm going to double click and get inside of that. And I think what's happening, look, it added a border around it. So I'm going to take that border off. And what it does, it's cool about using the repeating grid, is that I can change it on one element and it cascades through all the other elements. And so let's take this and let's take this whole repeating grid area, and we're going to hold down Shift and move it over so that it's now centered. Hold on a second. Oh, hold on. It looks like I made a mistake and this whole unit somehow got moved over. So now I can take this this grid and make sure that it's centered with the whole page, and it looks like we're pretty good there. And here's something that is happening though. Look, that's also problematic, and that is that gradient, it's like also making this border disappear, and I don't want that to happen. So I'm gonna zoom in. I'm gonna go in here, double click, and I'm gonna just slightly, very so slightly, I'll hold down Shift so that Shift and Option so that it starts to get smaller. Let's not hold down Shift actually. Let's just make it a little bit smaller on the edges so that I can see my border just fine. And I think that I'm okay with that. Let's try to make this a little bit, yeah, like that. That's fine. And then now you see that I can see my border all the way around, no problem. And I'm going to make this whole thing longer so that I can take my repeating grid and now drag it out so that I have 6 articles. I could say if you wanted to have more than 6, you could drag it out more. But the problem is, see, now it kind of everything disappears because, first of all, I need to include this box so that it gets bigger. All right. But the problem too is that my artboard, I need to make my artboard bigger. So if I select my artboard up here and I get my artboard handles, I can drag this out further, and let's just drag it out, and then we can always drag it back in later. So right now I don't need this to be quite that long. I can drag it so that the margins are like equal distance. All right, and then I can click its containing box, and I can make the containing box so that it's smaller as well. All right, and now I would need to take my background image, and I'm going to hold down Shift so that it will scale properly. And here's the thing, is that I'm not going to show you how to do this because I've pretty much shown you all of the stuff that I would need to show you how to do, but I would want a footer down here too. So I'm going to go ahead and make my background image go all the way down there, and let's say that this is going to be the size of my footer. So I could draw a big box that would be dark. Let's just say that I do that really fast. Let's go ahead. I'll just draw the space that my footer would go in, and let's come and draw that. And I'm going to give it no border for now, and I am going to give it a fill. Let's do pure black, but let's do it so that it's like 90% so that you can slightly see through it. And then I would start to put other stuff inside of that footer. Let's drag it down just a hair so the margin's good. And then I could start to put the elements of my footer down here. All right. And so that's how you can like start to build your page. And then whenever you're ready, you can make a mobile view, right? And so, to do that, you can click this little artboard symbol right here, and you see that this changes, and then you could pick a device size. You could pick an iPhone or an Android tablet or whatever, right? Whatever it is that you want to use as your basis. Let's say iPhone 6, 7, just a regular one, and then it shows you your artboard, and so you see the real estate that you would then have based on that, and you can start to copy and paste some of these elements, and you can modify, you know, like for instance, if I wanted, just to show you an example, let's say that I wanted to copy just this repeating element. I'm just going to copy that and paste it over here for a minute. And then you see that it's like far, far, far too big. Well, all I need to do first of all is go inside of it. And because this whole element is grouped, I can start to scale it like this, right? Oh, it's not. Let me make sure I've got this set. All right, so actually let's click all of these. I guess I don't know if I did group them. Anyway, but I've got them all grouped, and I could start to scale them in such a way that now if I go ahead and grab one of the other elements, I can change the spacing. Here, let's zoom out a little bit. I can change the spacing so that I can grab it and drag it in. But the thing is that actually doesn't really matter, to be honest, because I want to grab it and drag it down. And so I can drag this spacing and grab it and drag it up, right? And I don't need to open it like that. I can just close that element. Let's make sure that I'm closing it properly, right? And then I can, for instance, drag that over to center it. And that's the other thing that's nice about that repeating element, because then I could just grab my artboard and start to drag it down. And as long as this repeats, you've got it so that it features everything it's supposed to feature, then you've got that thing that you could just use as a repeated element that you copied from something else, and you just start to drag it out differently. All right. Obviously, you would want to put all your other stuff in there first, and figure that out. But I just wanted to show you how you can just take something that you already used and copy it, and then just slightly start to modify some stuff. Same would be true for these articles and things like that. Okay. I'm not going to walk you through how to do all of those things, but if you wanted just sort of as an idea of something that I had done, I'll go back to my other article or my other layout, and you see that what I had done was. And as an example, I started with this Canon Electric homepage, and then you see here's the other stuff I started to put down as, footer elements like widgetized areas. And then I made a mobile view, right? So if you look here, there's a mobile view. And then again, over here, I decided to go back and say, all right, well, I know what the home page looks like, but that one's going to be like an off page. It's the one off that's different. I want to make something that's going to be more representative of my other pages that has like a sidebar and stuff, if you decide to have a sidebar, of course. But, a lot of your pages are not going to all look the same. So what I did was I just duplicated this artboard by selecting the artboard and holding Shift Option, and I dragged it over, and then I just changed some of the stuff that needed changing. Not everything needed changing. It was just these areas. Okay, so anyway, that gives you an idea of how you can use XD for rapid prototyping. And even though we technically didn't do quote unquote prototyping, because prototyping is where you can start to develop areas where I could make a button, and whenever you hit the play button, you click the button and it goes to that other design layout page or whatever. I didn't do all of that, but this will really help you get started in XD, and you can also do other tutorials for other classes or whatever. Okay.